What if I told you that the worst betrayal of your life could become the greatest gift you ever received? That the people who crushed your dreams actually set you free to build something infinitely better? Hold on tight, because this story will make you question everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and second chances. My name is Sarah, and 3 years ago I died. Not literally, but close enough. The woman I was, naive, trusting, desperately seeking approval. She died the night I discovered the truth about my perfect life. But here's the twisted part. That death became my rebirth. And what followed? Well, let's just say revenge is a dish best served with a PhD and a 7-figure bank account. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, in a small town where everyone knows your business, and keeping secrets is an art form only some have mastered. I was 22 when I married David Chun, the golden boy of Riverside Falls. You know the type? Quarterback in high school, business degree from a decent college, family money, and a smile that could charm the paint off a barn. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 19, leaving me with nothing but student loans and a fierce determination to build the life they'd always wanted for me. David's family took me in like I was their own daughter. At least, that's what I thought. His mother, Patricia, would bake me cookies and tell me stories about what a wonderful mother I'd make someday. His father, Robert, treated me like the son he never had, teaching me about their family business, a small but successful construction company that had built half the houses in town. For 3 years, I threw myself into being the perfect wife. I managed their books, organized their family gatherings, and yes, I'll admit it, I tried desperately to get pregnant. Month after month, negative test after negative test. The whispers started small. At first, it was gentle concern from Patricia. Don't worry, sweetheart, these things take time. But as months turned into years, the concern became pointed questions, then accusations. Maybe you're too stressed, she'd say, watching me balance their company's finances late into the night. You know, Sarah, women who focus too much on careers sometimes have trouble conceiving. It's biological fact. David started working longer hours. Business trips became more frequent. When he was home, he'd sit across from me at dinner, scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging my attempts at conversation. I told myself it was the pressure of expanding the business. I made excuses for the way he'd flinch when I touched his shoulder, the way he'd suddenly develop headaches whenever I suggested we spend time together. The fertility doctor was the first crack in my perfectly constructed denial. After months of tests, she delivered news that should have been devastating but instead felt like vindication. Mrs. Chun, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your reproductive system. You're completely healthy. Have you considered having your husband tested? That night, I confronted David with the doctor's report. I expected relief, maybe even happiness that we could finally move forward. Instead, his face went white, and he mumbled something about being too tired to discuss it. But I saw something else in his eyes. Guilt so thick you could cut it with a knife. That's when I started paying attention. Really paying attention. The late-night phone calls he thought I couldn't hear. The way he'd suddenly need to run errands whenever his college friend Miranda came to town. The fact that Miranda, a stunning blonde with a laugh like wind chimes, had been spending a lot of time in Riverside Falls lately for someone who supposedly lived 3 hours away. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity the night of the company's annual summer barbecue. David had been drinking, and alcohol had always made him careless. I was in the kitchen, refilling the potato salad, when I heard Patricia's voice drifting through the open window. She was talking to her sister, Aunt Helen, and they clearly thought they were alone. I just don't understand why David doesn't divorce her already, Patricia was saying. 3 years, Helen. 3 years and no babies. At least Miranda's already proved she can carry his children. My blood turned to ice. Children. Plural. Well, you know men, Aunt Helen replied. They want to have their cake and eat it too. Sarah runs the business side of things perfectly, and Miranda gives him what he actually wants. Why change a good thing? Because it's not fair to any of them, Patricia sighed. Those poor babies, growing up thinking their father just visits them on weekends. And Sarah, God help me, I actually feel sorry for her sometimes. She tries so hard to be what we want her to be. I set down the potato salad with shaking hands. The world around me had tilted completely off its axis. The perfect family that had embraced me, the husband I'd devoted 3 years of my life to, the future I'd been building. All of it was built on lies so elaborate they'd managed to fool everyone, including me. But the worst part? I wasn't even the victim of some sudden betrayal. I was the convenient fool they'd all agreed to keep in the dark while they built their real family behind my back. That night, I lay in bed next to David, watching him sleep, and I made 2 decisions. First, I was going to find out exactly how deep this deception went. Second, I was going to make sure that when the truth finally came out, I wouldn't be the one left with nothing. The investigation took 6 weeks. I hired a private investigator with money I carefully siphoned from the business accounts I managed. What we uncovered was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. David and Miranda had been together since college, long before he'd ever met me. She'd gotten pregnant during our engagement, and they'd decided the best solution was to set up Miranda in a small apartment in the next town over while David married the grieving orphan, who could help his family's business grow. Miranda had given birth to twins, David's twins, just 4 months after our wedding. For 3 years, David had been playing devoted father to his real family, while pretending to want children with me. The business trips? Weekends playing daddy. The late nights at work? Actually late nights at Miranda's place, reading bedtime stories and playing house. But here's where it gets really twisted. Patricia and Robert knew everything. They'd helped arrange Miranda's apartment. They'd set up a college fund for the twins. They'd even been babysitting while David was stuck at home with me, probably counting the minutes until he could escape to his real life. The private investigator's photos were devastating. David pushing the twins on swings at a park 40 minutes from our house. David and Miranda at a grocery store, shopping together like any normal couple. David at the twins' 3rd birthday party, wearing a world's best dad t-shirt I'd never seen before. But the photo that broke something fundamental inside me was the family portrait. Professional photography, all 4 of them dressed in matching navy and white. David's arms around Miranda's shoulders, both children on his lap. All of them smiling like they were the happiest family in the world. It was dated just 2 weeks before our own 3rd wedding anniversary. The anniversary where I'd surprised David with a romantic dinner, and a positive pregnancy test I'd bought as a prop, desperately hoping it might spark some interest in trying harder to start our family. I stared at that photo for hours, and something inside me that had been Sarah Chun, devoted wife and eternal optimist, simply died. What took its place was harder, sharper, and absolutely done with being anyone's fool. My lawyer, Jennifer Walsh, was a shark in pearls who specialized in helping women extract themselves from complicated marriages. When I showed her the evidence we'd gathered, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Sarah," she said, leaning back in her leather chair, "this isn't just adultery. This is financial fraud, emotional abuse, and possibly even bigamy depending on how you look at the common-law marriage situation he's established with Miranda. We're not just getting you divorced. We're getting you everything." The beauty of managing all the family's finances for 3 years was that I knew exactly where every penny lived. David's trust fund from his grandfather, the business assets, the investment properties Robert had been buying as retirement planning. I had records of all of it. More importantly, I had documentation showing how much of the business's growth was directly attributable to my work, my connections, my financial management. But the real nuclear option was something I'd discovered almost by accident. Robert Chin had been cutting corners on some of the company's bigger projects, using substandard materials and pocketing the difference. I'd caught the discrepancies while doing routine bookkeeping, but I'd assumed they were honest mistakes. Now looking at everything through the lens of their massive deception, I realized those weren't mistakes at all. I had documentation of building code violations, fraudulent billing, and safety shortcuts that could land Robert in prison and bankrupt the company if the right people found out. In other words, I had leverage. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday. I'd planned it carefully, timing it for when the extended family would be gathered for Patricia's birthday dinner. I walked into their dining room, where they were all laughing over dessert, and I set 3 manila envelopes on the table. "The first envelope," I announced, watching their faces change from confusion to alarm, "contains divorce papers. David, you'll notice I'm asking for 50% of all marital assets, including your stake in the family business, plus alimony based on my 3 years of unpaid labor as your bookkeeper and office manager. David started to speak, but I held up my hand. The second envelope contains a detailed report of building code violations and fraudulent billing practices that I'll be submitting to the State Contractors Licensing Board and the District Attorney's Office if you contest the divorce in any way. Robert's face had gone gray. Patricia was clutching her pearls like they might save her. The third envelope, I continued, pulling out one of the private investigator's photos, contains evidence of your son's dual family situation, which I think Miranda and your grandchildren deserve to know has been documented in case anyone tries to claim I'm making false accusations. I set the family portrait photo in the center of the table, right next to Patricia's birthday cake. I have to say, you all look beautiful together. It's a shame David forgot to mention, he already had the family he wanted when he was promising to start one with me. The silence was deafening. Finally, David found his voice. Sarah, I can explain. Explain what? I laughed, and it was a sound I'd never heard myself make before. Cold and sharp and completely without warmth. Explain how you've been lying to me for 3 years. Explain how your entire family has been treating me like some kind of useful idiot. Explain how you've been playing house with your real family, while I sat here like an idiot, thinking there was something wrong with me. Patricia tried next. Sarah, sweetheart, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. I understand that you all made a calculation. Keep Sarah around to manage the books and run the office. Let David play devoted husband just enough to maintain the arrangement. And everybody wins except Sarah, who apparently doesn't count as a real person with real feelings. I gathered up the envelopes and looked around the table at these people who had been my family for 3 years. Here's what's going to happen. David is going to sign those divorce papers without contest. And I'm going to walk away with enough money to rebuild my life somewhere far from here. In exchange, your business doesn't get shut down by the state, and your precious grandchildren don't grow up with their father in prison for fraud. You can't do this, Robert said, but his voice was shaky. That business is my life's work. You should have thought about that before you decided to build it on lies and substandard materials, I replied. I spent 3 years cleaning up your messes and covering your shortcuts, thinking I was helping family. Turns out I was just enabling criminals. David tried one more appeal. Sarah, please. This isn't you. You're not vindictive. You're kind and forgiving, Anne. And stupid. I finished. And naive. And so desperate for a family that I'd put up with anything. I shook my head. That person died tonight. This is who I am now. And this new version of me? She doesn't forgive, and she doesn't forget. I headed toward the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and David? When you tell Miranda what happened here tonight, and you will tell her because she deserves to know what kind of man she's actually with, make sure you mention that I could have destroyed all of you completely, but I chose not to. I chose to just take what I was owed and walk away. I hope she appreciates the restraint, because it's the last kindness any of you will ever get from me. The divorce was finalized in 6 weeks. David didn't contest a single demand. I walked away with $400,000 in cash, investments that would mature to nearly twice that, and my freedom. More importantly, I walked away with the knowledge that I was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined, both in terms of building something and, when necessary, tearing it down. I used the money to disappear completely. Not physically. I'm not in witness protection or anything that dramatic. But I disappeared from the version of myself that had been Sarah Chun, devoted wife and eternal optimist. I moved to Seattle, enrolled in business school, and set out to become the person I should have been all along. Graduate school was a revelation. Surrounded by ambitious, brilliant people who valued intelligence and drive over compliance and accommodation, I discovered that I had a gift for strategic thinking and competitive analysis. My professors started using my case studies as examples for other students. By my second year, I was being courted by consulting firms that specialized in corporate turnarounds and restructuring. But the real transformation wasn't professional, it was personal. I learned to trust my instincts. I learned to ask hard questions and demand real answers. I learned that kindness and strength weren't opposites, and that being forgiving didn't mean being a doormat. Most importantly, I learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that your former enemies become irrelevant. I graduated summa cum laude and accepted a position with Morrison & Associates, a boutique consulting firm that specialized in helping family businesses navigate complex transitions. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now the person companies called when family dynamics were threatening to destroy everything they'd built. 3 years later, I was a senior partner with my own team and a client list that read like a who's who of Pacific Northwest business. I'd helped save dozens of family businesses, mediated succession disputes worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and earned a reputation as the consultant you called when the situation seemed hopeless. I'd also learned to date like a grown-up, not the desperate, approval-seeking dating of my early 20s, but actual partnership with people who saw me as an equal. I'd had several serious relationships, including one with Marcus, a brilliant architect who designed sustainable housing projects and treated me like I was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. My life was full, successful, and entirely my own. I thought about David and his family sometimes, but only in the abstract way you might think about a movie you'd seen years ago. Interesting at the time, but no longer relevant to your current life. And then Patricia Chun called my office. "Miss Thompson," my assistant said, "there's a Mrs. Chun on the line. She says it's urgent and personal." For a moment, I couldn't place the name. Sarah Chun felt like someone I'd known in another lifetime. Then it hit me. Patricia had somehow tracked down my married name and found me. "I'll take it," I said, more curious than angry. Patricia's voice was smaller than I remembered, tentative in a way that would have made the old Sarah immediately try to comfort her. "Sarah? Sarah, is that really you?" "It's Dr. Thompson now," I said calmly. "Patricia, it's been, 6 years? How did you find me?" I hired someone. A private investigator. Like you did." Her voice cracked. "Sarah, I need your help." The story that tumbled out was almost too perfect to be real. After I'd left, David had indeed married Miranda, making their arrangement official. But Miranda, it turned out, had her own secrets. She'd been siphoning money from David's accounts, supposedly to invest in a business opportunity that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. When that collapsed, she doubled down, taking out loans against the construction company without telling anyone. Meanwhile, Robert's cost-cutting had finally caught up with him. One of the houses he'd built with substandard materials had suffered foundation damage during a heavy storm, and the resulting lawsuit had revealed the pattern of code violations I'd documented years earlier. The state had revoked his contractor's license and imposed fines that had bankrupted the company. David, desperate to keep everything afloat, had made increasingly risky business decisions. He'd borrowed against equipment, sold off properties at below-market prices, and eventually started cutting the same corners his father had, just to keep the lights on. The final blow had come 6 months ago. Miranda had vanished in the night, taking the twins and every penny she could access, leaving behind a mountain of debt, and a note saying she'd never actually loved David. She'd just been looking for security, and since he couldn't provide it anymore, she was moving on to someone who could. "Sarah," Patricia said, and I could hear tears in her voice, "we're going to lose everything. The house, the business, everything my husband spent 40 years building. David he's not handling it well. He talks about you sometimes, about how smart you were with money, how you saw problems he missed. I know we don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Is there any way you could help us?" I sat in my corner office, looking out at the Seattle skyline, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction at their downfall, no anger at the audacity of asking for help, no lingering pain from old wounds. Just a kind of distant professional curiosity. "Patricia," I said finally, "I'm a business consultant. I help companies restructure and recover from financial difficulties. If you'd like to engage my services, my assistant can send you our standard contract and fee schedule." You'd actually help us?" The hope in her voice was heartbreaking. "I'd help anyone who can afford my rates and is willing to follow my recommendations," I replied. "But I should warn you, I don't work miracles, and I don't let personal feelings override sound business judgment. If I determine that the best strategy is liquidation, that's what I'll recommend, regardless of sentiment." There was a long pause, How much would it cost? I named my standard fee for a complete business assessment and restructuring plan. $75,000 upfront, plus daily rates for implementation. I heard her sharp intake of breath. That's more than we have liquid right now. Then you have your answer, I said, not unkindly. Patricia, I hope you find a solution that works for your family. But it won't be with me. I was about to hang up when she spoke again, her voice desperate. Sarah, please. I know you hate us and we deserve it, but David is talking about. He's talking about giving up entirely. I'm afraid of what that means. And there it was, the hook they thought would still work on me. The implication that if I didn't save them, whatever happened next would be my fault. The old Sarah would have crumbled, would have found a way to help regardless of cost or personal hurt. But the woman I'd become just smiled. Patricia, I said gently. David is a 40-year-old man who spent years lying to his wife while building a second family with another woman. He chose to continue his father's pattern of cutting corners and fraud. He chose to trust Miranda with money she wasn't entitled to. He chose every single action that led to where he is today. His choices, his consequences. But, no, I interrupted. My voice still calm but absolutely final. I spent 3 years of my life cleaning up messes I didn't make, taking responsibility for failures that weren't mine, and apologizing for problems I didn't cause. I'm not that person anymore. David's mental health is not my responsibility. Your family's financial problems are not my responsibility. The consequences of decades of lies and poor decisions are not my responsibility. I paused, letting that sink in. Here's what is my responsibility. The business I've built, the clients who trust me, the team I've assembled, and my own well-being. I've worked very hard to create a life where I'm not constantly putting out fires other people set. And I'm not going to go back to that, not even for money. Sarah, please. It's Dr. Thompson, I corrected one last time. And this conversation is over. Don't contact me again. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, waiting to feel something. Guilt, maybe, or satisfaction, or anger. Instead, I felt the same thing I'd felt throughout the entire conversation. Absolutely nothing. That evening, I called Marcus and told him the story over dinner. He listened without interrupting, occasionally reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. How do you feel? He asked when I finished. I considered the question seriously. Free, I said finally. For the first time since all of this started, I feel completely free. No part of you wants to ride in like a white knight and save the day. I laughed, and it was genuine this time, warm and full of real humor. The old Sarah would have driven down there that night with a briefcase full of solutions and a plan to fix everything. But the old Sarah was an idiot who thought love meant sacrificing yourself for people who saw you as disposable. And the new Sarah? The new Sarah knows the difference between love and enabling, between kindness and stupidity, between helping someone and letting them help themselves to you. Marcus raised his wine glass. To the new Sarah, then. And to knowing when to walk away. To knowing when to walk away, I agreed. 6 months later, I heard through mutual connections that the Chun family construction business had declared bankruptcy. David had indeed left town. Not through suicide, as Patricia had implied, but by accepting a job with a construction crew in Alaska, about as far from his problems as he could get without leaving the country. Patricia and Robert had lost their house, and were living with Robert's sister in a neighboring state. The twins had been located living with Miranda's mother in Oregon, and social services had gotten involved to establish proper custody and support arrangements. It was a cautionary tale that had spread through the small business community like wildfire. The family construction company that had imploded due to fraud, infidelity, and spectacularly poor decision-making. I'd heard the story retold at industry conferences, always with the same moral. Family businesses needed professional oversight and clear governance structures, or personal drama would inevitably destroy everything. No one telling the story knew I was the Sarah who'd been married into the mess, or that I was now the consultant they'd called for help at the end. I was just Dr. Thompson, the successful business strategist who'd built something impressive from nothing. And that was exactly how I preferred it. The real revenge, I realized, wasn't that I'd refused to help them when they'd called. It wasn't even that I'd taken half their assets in the divorce. or that I'd held evidence of their crimes over their heads. The real revenge was that I'd used their betrayal as rocket fuel to become someone infinitely better than the person they'd tried to keep small and grateful and dependent. They'd discarded Sarah Chin thinking she was worthless, but what they'd actually done was set free someone who'd been pretending to be less than she was because she thought that's what love looked like. Marcus and I got engaged on the anniversary of my divorce. Not because of any symbolic gesture, but because it happened to be a Saturday in March when we were hiking in the mountains, and the moment felt exactly right. He proposed with a ring he designed himself. Not a diamond, but a custom-cut sapphire surrounded by smaller stones in a pattern that looked like a compass rose. "Because you always know which direction you're going," he said when he slipped it onto my finger. We married 8 months later in a ceremony that was everything my first wedding hadn't been. Authentic, joyful, and surrounded by people who actually knew and loved both of us as individuals. My business partner and closest friend, Jennifer, was my maid of honor. Marcus's sister flew in from London to officiate. The whole event cost less than the flowers at my wedding to David, but it felt like the most luxurious celebration in the world. During our honeymoon in Iceland, I got a text from an unknown number. It was brief and sent without explanation. "Sarah, I hope you're happy. You deserved so much better than what we gave you. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to understand that. David." I showed Marcus the message. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds, then deleted the text without responding. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing to do." And that was the truth. David's apology, years too late and prompted only by his own losses, meant nothing to me. It wasn't because I was still angry. I wasn't. It was because I genuinely didn't need it. The Sarah who'd been desperate for his approval, who'd been crushed by his betrayal, who'd mourned the loss of their relationship. She was gone. The woman I was now had built something so much better than what I'd lost that his apology felt like someone apologizing for breaking a toy I'd outgrown years ago. Unnecessary and irrelevant. That night, lying in our hotel bed and watching the northern lights dance across the Icelandic sky, I told Marcus about the text and my reaction to it. "I used to think the point of all this was to make them sorry," I said. "To show them what they'd lost when they chose to throw me away. But that's not it at all." "What is it then?" "The point was to stop caring whether they were sorry or not. The point was to build a life so good that their opinion of it became completely irrelevant." Marcus turned onto his side to face me. "Mission accomplished?" I smiled and pulled him closer. "Mission accomplished." Looking back now, 5 years later, I can see the whole arc of the story clearly. The betrayal that felt like it would destroy me actually saved me from a life that would have slowly consumed everything I was meant to become. The people who discarded me thinking I was worthless accidentally set me free to discover what I was actually worth. But here's the thing that took me longest to understand. The best revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. It's making their betrayal irrelevant. It's building something so authentically yours, so genuinely fulfilling, that what they took from you becomes obvious for what it really was, a favor in disguise. David and his family thought they were using me, but what they actually did was teach me the most valuable lesson I've ever learned. Never again would I mistake being needed for being loved, or confuse being convenient with being valued. The business I built, the marriage I'm in, the life I've created, none of it would exist if they hadn't betrayed me. Their worst behavior became the foundation of my best life. And that, more than any punishment I could have inflicted, more than any revenge I could have plotted, is the most perfect justice I can imagine. Sometimes people ask me if I ever wonder what would have happened if David had been honest from the beginning, if his family had treated me with real respect, if I'd gotten the faithful husband and loving in-laws I thought I was signing up for. The answer is simple. I'd probably still be Sarah Chun, small-town bookkeeper, grateful for whatever scraps of affection came her way, never pushing for more because she didn't think she deserved it. I'd be raising David's legitimate children now, probably still doing the books for a family business built on corners cut and rules bent, still believing that love meant making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. I'd be living a life that looked fine from the outside but felt hollow at the center, wondering why I always felt so tired, so grateful, so endlessly apologetic for taking up space in the world. Instead, I'm Dr. Sarah Thompson, business consultant, happy wife, Woman who learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing that could have happened to you, if you're brave enough to use it as fuel instead of letting it become an anchor. The betrayal set me free. The revenge was living well enough that the betrayal became a gift. And if you're going through something similar right now, if someone you trusted has shown you who they really are, if people you thought loved you have revealed that they only loved what you could do for them, I want you to know this. It's not the end of your story. It's not even the worst chapter. It's the chapter where everything changes. It's the chapter where you stop accepting less than you deserve and start building more than you ever imagined possible. The people who betrayed you think they won, but they have no idea what they've actually unleashed. And neither do you. Yet. But you're about to find out. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you were giving everything to people who saw you as disposable, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this one, stories about people who turned their worst betrayals into their biggest breakthroughs, that's what this channel is all about.